Hey, bestie, and welcome back to the Plobcast for episode 4. This is going to be a very special episode because not only do we have GameStop stories and follower submission stories, we also have a lot of Momocon stories. If you don't know, I was recently at Momocon, and if you didn't see the other videos and pictures of them, we ran into quite a bit of plobs and flobs at this convention. It was a lot worse than it has been in more recent years. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that this podcast is not for little ears. I am unmonetized, so I get to be unfiltered, and I say the quiet part out loud quite a bit. So let's dive right in. I drove to Momocon from Central Texas, which, if you don't know, Momo's in Atlanta, Georgia. It took me 17 hours instead of 13. It was, or actually, I think it was around 18. It was a mess. The point is, I had been up for 31 hours by the time I finally got to the con day one. And before we even entered the con, we were just looking for parking at that point. We drive past a group of plobs, and you're probably wondering, if you're just seeing them on the side of the road, how could you know they were plobs? That's because one of them had a shit streak on his backside, on his pants. Right, a big old streak of shit. And the other ones also were, there was a group of 4 of them. They were playing on those scooters that they have around Atlanta. Why is that a thing? I guess it's just not the scooters themselves, but for some reason, like plobs and incels and stuff, when they go to gaming conventions, they go and play on the scooters. Like, I even have one of my plob exes, a video of him. They're so fascinated by the scooters, and I understand that a lot of these guys and the women that do it too, basement dwellers live in their basements, so like they're shocked by any little thing in society. But they all seem to want, as soon as they go to a convention, when they finally leave their house after not touching grass for months, they want to go out and be crazy and stuff, and they get excited by the scooters. But these dudes were playing on their scooters, and I look over, and they have the traditional haircut and beard. I don't know what it is, if like all the plobs have just collectively decided that they're all going to get the exact same haircut and beard cut. But I saw them, and I'm thinking, there's like a 50-50 chance. And then one of them is playing on the scooter, turns around, and I see the shit streak. Right there, broad daylight, just a shit streak on his khaki pants. He's wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt too. That's another thing. A lot of them seem to have this particular dress code. It's those gray sweatpants, not the sexy kind, but those ones, if you've seen them, or they wear the khaki, like, shorts with a Hawaiian shirt. It's always a freaking Hawaiian shirt, or it's a random gamer tee that usually doesn't fit them. It's falling apart because they've worn it so much and not washed it. You could tell none of these guys had bathed. Like, it was pretty obvious. And my thing is how are you going to sit there and let your friend walk around with a shit streak? I mean, I guess it's normal for them because they're used to probably doing it themselves. But you're literally letting this man walk around Atlanta, walk around the con with a shit streak on his ass. But don't worry, that's not the only literal shit we encountered at this convention. So day one, it gets done. That was like the most, because I was up for 31 hours. We were over there maybe an hour or so because we were tired. We knew, like, there was all this stuff that we were going to be doing on Friday and Saturday. So I was like, you know what? Let's, 1 hour. I got some pictures of my VA dress, which I did tell story time on that. I cosplayed as the horrible Veterans Affairs system, healthcare system, to show kind of like a activism dress, or not political dress, whatever they call it, where like you're calling out a bad system through art and clothing. Like, I was just calling out how horrible the VA system is, especially because it's Memorial Day weekend, which we're going to get into that later on. So get our pictures, we go back, we eat, we pass out, and get up the next day, and we are dressed as the Plot Patrol, if you did not see that. The irony in us being dressed as that, because yes, we dressed up as the Plot Patrol. Also, I just want to thank all of the amazing people who I gave out Plot Patrol vinyls to, because I made these vinyls, if you didn't see, and I was passing them out to any of my mutuals or followers who came up to me. I gave them little gifts too. We also hid tiny little lavender duckies all around the con for people to see and to people to take home. But I have officially recruited. I even made them into scrolls, so you could either put them on your shirt, your clothes, your bag, your cup, whatever. It's just a permanent vinyl from a Cricut, so you can put it on whatever you need. And I had recruited, like, it was like a little ceremony recruiting Plob Patrollers. If you didn't see the video of what we had in our utility belt had like sprays for your room, for yourself, deodorant sprays. We had soaps, we had hand sanitizer, we had these Nods mints that I was sent, which are like toothpaste mints, so they actually kill the bacteria and all that stuff. So some of y'all have some hot ass breath. I had a water gun that had soap and water in it, but I did put a lock on it so nobody could just run up and like be spraying strangers, because that is assault. And while 99% of the response to that was amazing, great, people were like, how do I get a scroll? Or like, let me find you, or whatever. Because there's some people too, like halfway through the con, maybe their deodorant ran out, and there's no shame. There's no shame in walking up and asking me for a spray. I'm not going to shame you for that. But there is shame in walking around smelling like ass and choosing to smell like that. Especially because it gets real hot and the rooms were getting real stinky. We'll get into the rooms here in a minute. Also, I do apologize. The rain seems to be picking up in the background. I am hoping you guys can't hear that. Like I said, most of the interactions were amazing, but then I did have a couple of people who got mad about it. I have one comment that I ended up deleting it, but I screenshotted it beforehand, of someone who was saying we were cosplaying as oppression. You not washing your ass is not you being oppressed, okay? People not wanting to smell your stinky, nasty plob ass is not you being oppressed. That is an insane take, to think that people not wanting to smell your pheromone maxing and your shit streaks and stuff is you being oppressed. Like the idea of people, it's just insane to think about. Somebody actually, like I said, I've got a screenshot. Somebody actually said you're cosplaying as oppression. If you don't know, I also wore my Make Pedophiles Afraid Again hat, which once again has nothing to do with Trump or anything like that. It has to do with being anti-pedophile, which is nothing to do with the Cheeto Man. I did a whole video on why we need to stop allowing people to take these words and sayings and ruin them by making them into hateful things, and we need to stand up and stop allowing them to do that. Like I talked about in the video, how I've been called a faggot a million times, and how that's not the original origin of the word, but it's been taken and turned into hate, and we need to start taking these things back. Not the point of this story, though. If you don't know, one aspect of plobs, one type of plob, is the ones that like little girls and the anime characters that look like they're 8 years old, and they'll be like, oh, but they're a 400-year-old vampire, so it's fine that I'm attracted to her body. No, it's not. You're a pedophile. That's why it was so important for me to have that piece to the Plob Patrol, because sometimes plobs don't necessarily stink physically. Sometimes it's their personality that stinks and their disgusting life decisions. Plob is just someone who ruins fandom by being horrible, not showering, or just sexism, or being a fucking pedophile, just to put it simply. I wanted to make sure all of those aspects were in this cosplay. But once again, still had a couple people who got offended, who were saying that it was, the oppression thing, that comment's the one that got me the most, because what the fuck? I also had a guy who was upset by it, saying that he wasn't going to waste precious convention time by going back to the hotel and showering every day and changing his clothes, because if you don't know, Momocon is a 24-hour gaming room, and this guy literally was so upset by these cosplays, saying that we were the bad guys because he paid all this money to come to Momocon, so he's going to spend as much time as he possibly can at the convention. He's not going to go all the way back to his hotel to shower and change clothes every single day. He was convinced that he didn't stink that bad, but I literally smelled this guy about 20 feet before he even walked up to me to have his little rant. It's ironic that he's talking about how him showering would ruin, take away from time, but then guys like him were ruining panels for other people. There was 2 or 3 different gaming panels we really wanted to go to, and did not get to because the rooms of those panels smelled so bad from these guys. Like, I have a video posted on TikTok, and I've got a second one to post too, of where we were literally having to sit outside of the room, watch it through the doorway, watch it through the little glass window on the other one, and listen to it, because you walked into the room and it smelled so bad I wanted to throw up. I ended up having to take a Zofran. It smelled so bad when I walked, I could not take it. And it wasn't just us. While we were sitting outside, watching through and listening, we were watching people literally come up, smell the room, and walk right back out. And what's crazy is there were certain guys who were coming into the panel late, so we were like seeing them come in, and you could smell them as they walked in, and they all had that same unbathed, unwashed clothes looked like they just crawled out of their mommy's basement. One of the guys that I did see that, one of the normal guys that walked in and then walked back out, he was in the room for, I think, like maybe 5 to 7 minutes for that one. He did last a little bit. He didn't make it through the whole hour panel, but he was like 5-7 minutes. And he comes out, and him and his friend were talking about how they're like, yeah, this is how us gamers get a bad rep because of guys like that. That's another thing that drives me nuts, is when, if you notice, if you go on to any of my videos talking about female plobs, flobs, you will not find a single comment from from a woman being like, "Oh yeah, like you're being a woman hater by bringing up these problematic people." But if you go onto the plob videos, there's always at least one man that I end up either blocking or, just letting my followers destroy him in the comments, complaining about how I'm, supposedly a man hater because I'm bringing up this, these nasty men. Which very much tells on themselves, because if you weren't being the problem, you wouldn't be offended by my videos, especially because I talk about both male and female plobs. Not to mention, out of all of the stories that I get submitted, probably around 40 to 50% of them are submitted by men, by other men who are like, I don't want to deal with they're giving us a bad reputation. They're causing all these issues. I have 3 separate former incels, and we're going to get into one of those stories because one of those stories was sent to me while at con. But I have had 3 former incels tell me their stories, reach out to me and be like, hey, so it's those guys who actually made me open up my eyes and be like, hey, maybe this incel ideology and stuff is bad, because they were scared off by other stinky plobs. You can go into any comment video and find plenty of other men complaining about this. Yes, I get more stories about men doing this stuff than women, but whose fault is that? Nobody's making them be incels and nasty and stinky and gross. That's a life choice right there, buddy. That is a life choice, and other men are tired of your shit too. Another thing that's really telling is, if you don't know who Wizard of T-Shirts is, go look him up. He's amazing. Or Wizard in a T-Shirt. He is amazing. I've stitched him before and stuff. If you notice, he makes skits about these kind of guys, about plobs, about incels. And, he's made GameStop story skits before too. Game store stories, card shops, all of it, of his personal interactions with these kind of guys. And you will not see a single comment on his comments from somebody being like, oh, you must hate men. You're just doing this because you hate men, like you see on mine. It's very telling, because also 80% of his comments are from other men complaining about it too. As a whole, the gaming community is tired of it. The gaming community, the anime community, I've seen furries even complaining about it. Fandom space in general, people are tired of these particular groups ruining it. And it's only realistically about 15 to 20% of these communities that have any of these issues, whether it be the stank or the misogyny or anything. It's not even a whole quarter of them. It is that small group, but it ruins it for everybody else. Speaking of female plobs, one of the other interactions we had at Momocon is we went downstairs. Ironically, this is over by the gaming hall, is where this ended up happening at. We go into the bathroom, and we notice there's a line. There's like a couple of people in front of us, but there's a stall open. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, I really just, I have got to pee. So I go and look at that stall. It finally becomes my turn. I go look in that stall. Someone had shit their pants, shit all in their costume, all over it. And I don't know if somebody brought them a change of clothes or what happened here, but they decided, instead of throwing it away and cleaning up their mess, to leave the shitty costume all over the bathroom floor, and it completely ruined a stall. I mean, there was shit everywhere. And then they're just giant costume right there on the floor. Not to mention the fact that you could smell where the gamer hall was before you got to it. You didn't need to look up and see where the signs were. Once you started getting close to it, you could smell it because of how disgusting it was. Because if you haven't seen the story times, there are so many of these plobs who will go to conventions like Momocon that have 24-hour gaming halls. Half of them don't even book a hotel, and they will just stay in the gaming hall the entire time of the con. And you'll see some of them even napping up against the wall and stuff sometimes, and drinking energy drinks and stuff, so they can just game that entire 4-day weekend and not shower, not change their clothes, nothing. I had so many motherfuckers too while I was in my KDA cosplay from League of Legends. I was dressed up and I was enjoying myself, and I got a lot of compliments, and I want to say thank you, especially from women. I was really shocked, because usually when I do, because I've done Ahari before too from League of Legends, I've done Diva from Overwatch, I've done a lot of Cammy from Street Fighters. A lot of those cosplays I get compliments on, people taking pictures with me. At 18 plus conventions, I will even step on people for fun, which is just a fun thing to do. Only adults, of course. I will literally ID. If somebody looks a little young, I'm like, I need to see your ID before I step on you. But it's usually mostly men that give those compliments and stuff. But this year, I actually got a lot of compliments from women, which I will fully admit boosted my ego quite a bit. I also had a random man who told me that I must be just a fake poser that never plays League. I'm probably just an Arcane fan. because women don't play our League and all that bullshit. And I just laugh because I've never even seen Arcane. I do play League of Legends. Now, I will admit the reason I got into League of Legends is because of Fictional Man. Because I had been big into Overwatch. There was so much controversy around the League of Legends fandom about the misogyny and stuff, and I'd seen it myself, especially because I have a brother that plays, a lot of friends that play, and they've been trying to convince me for years to give it a chance. And then I finally gave it a chance because Shigaraki from My Hero is a canon League player. It's confirmed in the series and by the author. The reason why League of Villains is named League of Villains is because of his obsession with League of Legends. And then also Vanguard Action Squad is named after Vanguard. So being a Shigaraki fan, I finally caved and I tried League. And yeah, there's a lot of problem. I ain't turning my mic on for nothing. But the game is actually really good. But as always, that one guy was not the only one that I had made the comments about the fake fan and the arcane shit. I had a lot of compliments, but then I also had a couple of men who got super creepy about it that stunk to high hell, that were trying to talk about how, like, women should only be playing, Animal Crossing and stuff, and probably suck at League. First of all, once again, I have testicles, bitch, and I am about to teabag you with them if you do not get your smelly ass away from me, assaulting my damn nose. It feels like a terrorist attack on my nose. Because I don't know what it is about League in particular. League, World of Warcraft, certain RPGs and stuff, like certain games. It's like those are the fans that purposely don't shower. I'm not trying to stereotype. I mean, technically, I am stereotype. I don't care. But I have never had an Animal Crossing or like any Sims player or anything come up to me and smell the way some of these League and Call of Duty and World of Warcraft fans smell. And it sucks because the games are great. The actual games are amazing. And for whatever reason, their fans are the exact opposite. I feel like the better the game, the stinkier the fan. Also, I do want to clarify real quick because I've seen a lot of these videos going around TikTok, and I did post about it, but it didn't get very many views compared to the views of the rumors. Nobody tried to like randomly kill themselves at the con. That's not what happened at all. I've got video of this. The person who got hauled away in the ambulance, they also didn't fully evacuate Momocon. Everybody kept saying they evacuated the whole con. No, they didn't. They evacuated a certain area, made people move out of the way so they could get to this guy and take him off in the ambulance. That was the whole thing. That was it. His group had been on substances. We were literally sitting outside because if you don't know, part of Captain America was filmed at Momocon. The scene where they're supposed to be in Japan with the president, it was filmed at a certain part of Momocon. We were outside at this time, over in that area because I wanted to show like my Captain America backpack in a video and like fun little, fact about fandom space and stuff, talking about that. And the people next to us in the background are literally so high that they're bragging about like how they're on Molly and on other stuff, and you can smell the weed and everything. And they were talking about how they hadn't really eaten or anything. And we were talking about, like, me and my friend were like, yeah, we're really worried because these people are talking about like how they're not taking care of themselves while taking all these substances. It's super hot outside. It's crowded this con. Somebody's going to get hurt. And then a couple hours later, we were one of the people that got shoved to the side, not fully evacuated, just shoved to the side. And we sat there and we watched him come out on ambulance. I'm like, yep, that's the guy from the group that was talking about being super high on Molly. Of course, I've seen 500 different videos of people talking about 500 different stories they came up with. And some of them even showed the guy's face. And I think that was super messed up because, yeah, this guy was an idiot for not, doing all these substances and everything. And you being irresponsible and whatnot at this convention in the heat. But at the same time, please don't record somebody in an ambulance in this very vulnerable moment. That's so rude just for TikTok views. There was another person too who had an asthma attack, and she jokingly posted saying like, oh, don't drink the water at Momocon, because if you don't know, there was a situation at Hallmat last year, year before, where one person got drugged and a bunch of other people, it was like the freaking placebo effect, spread a rumor that the water was tainted. So like this person was making a joke about it and people didn't bother to read the caption and was being like, oh my gosh, they drugged the water at Momo just like they did at Hallmat. I'm like, neither of those things happened. Speaking of craziness that happened at MomoCon, that actually did happen, Whole Wheat Pete showed up. And if you don't know who Whole Wheat Pete is, there's plenty of videos. He is such a plob. He doesn't smell bad usually from the interactions I've had around him, but he very much has the plob incel-like mentality. He is actually banned from MomoCon. That's why he couldn't get a pass, and he was just walking around the areas like in cosplay, that you didn't have to have a pass to. Dude is a complete nightmare, and it was very frustrating that the con did not kick him out of the center. They should have. He apparently is also going to be trying to go to Matsuri Con again this year. If you don't know, Matsuri happens here in Texas. It is coming up here in July. Really hoping he doesn't show up again because if you don't know the story behind him, last time he was at Matsuri, he decided to jump on a random underage girl in front of everybody for a skit. Didn't warn her or anything. He even had like another cosplayer for like do the same cos when he was getting called out for it. He had another cosplayer dress up as the character and claim that they were that person and be like, oh no, I can sit in and stuff. It's like, no, that's not the one that you jumped on in your video that you're getting backlash for literally assaulting a minor over. And I know that for a fact because you can even see part of it happening in some of the background pictures of my Cammy cosplay. We're taking pictures of when this happened. It was my friend group that sat with this girl until her parents got there because she was like hysterically crying, freaked out because he had ran over and just jumped on her for a skit. And sadly, you see that a lot with that man, just being creepy, inappropriate. Like, there's a difference in dark humor, and crossing the line, and jumping on complete strangers and all this crap, and cosplaying as P Diddy. Testing 1 2 3. Okay, I am so sorry for that random silence. The power went out for a second there and I messed up my mic and I didn't know how to crop that out, so we're gonna just keep getting into it. I apologize for that random silence. I will say I am learning how to do the editing and stuff, so I should here in the next couple episodes be able to give you guys better quality with this. Honestly, I wish this rain had happened at Momocon because then maybe we could have like forcibly washed away some of the stank off of these motherfuckers. But sadly, it was just hot and sunny, which, is nice for the con, but still, something. Come on, God. Can you not help us with the stink? The stink be gone. Speaking of stink be gone, another interaction that I had with the plob, which, like I said, anytime I do these certain cosplays, even though I'm doing them because I love the character, I always have the pervs. I have the ones that have tried to sneak pictures of my ass. I have ones that'll like pretend to accidentally scroll by me as they touch my butt when they walk by. I had one guy who walked by me and did that. He did the sleight of hand thing where he was trying to swipe his hand up against my ass in the artist alley. Or we might have been on the vendor side. I can't remember if we were on the vendors or the artist alley at that point. But yeah, swiped by. His hands were so dirty. I had to go clean my fucking skirt because, first of all, he tried to act like he didn't do it. I'm like, dude, there's literally a dirt streak on my cosplay now because you wiped your hand up against trying to cop a feel. And I understand that this is unfortunately something that happens. It shouldn't happen. Cosplay is not consent and it should not happen, but it's something that a lot of us deal with at cons, especially because these guys live in their basements so much. And then when they finally see like a real life person dressed as their favorite character or whatever, they get creepy about it. But to be so stinky and nasty, and I could smell him too. I could smell him before he even came over to me. I was like, I leaned in to look at something is when this happened. Smell him a mile away, but to be so nasty and grimy that you swiped across me for less than 2 seconds, like it's probably 2-3 seconds, and you left a dirt streak, a brown streak of dirt on my costume, so I had to clean it, is disgusting. Before we move on to the GameStop stories and the incel stories that were submitted to me by former incels, I do want to also quickly remind people of convention etiquette. If there is a panel going on, please do not stand outside of the door and loudly talk. Don't loudly talk anywhere at the convention. But this was a problem because one of the panels we went into that didn't stink, thank God, we were sitting there and multiple of us were struggling to hear because there was somebody being super rude. They were standing in the doorway. They weren't even watching the panel. They were just in the doorway having a very, very loud conversation to the point I ended up getting up and closing the door. And they looked at me like I was being the rude one, but people were like, heck yes, thank you for closing it because we could not hear. So please keep in mind, con etiquette. Also, if you want a picture with somebody, there's no shame in like asking for a picture. Cosplayers usually love having their pictures taken. I mean, one year at Matsuri, I literally gave out 500 of my picture lollipops because every time somebody asked for a picture, I give them out a lollipop. I have no problem having getting a picture, but do not be trying to sneak pictures. Don't ask when somebody's eating either. I also saw somebody post a video of a creepy plob who they had went to. I think they were at ASIN. I can't remember what con they were at because there's multiple going on this weekend, but they were at a con. It was these two beautiful women, and somebody had asked for a picture of them. They go to take their picture, and then afterwards he's like signaling for them to turn around, and they're like, what? And he was literally wanting them to turn around so he could get pictures of their ass. Now that's not no, that's not okay. You can ask for pictures, but you never ask to for a picture of somebody's at like that. The audacity. Also, don't assume that you can touch cosplayers for pictures. Now, I have plenty of times, put arm around, somebody put their arm around my shoulder or something like that. But like, don't don't just assume that you're allowed to touch the cosplayer. Please don't touch their props either. Some of these things are super delicate. Just remember basic con etiquette. And shower is part of con etiquette too. Shower, deodorant, changing your clothes every day. Leaving the gaming hall. Like the fact that you could smell the gaming hall before you could see the sign for it is disgusting. Oh, one last thing about the con before we switch to the incel stories. I do want to apologize for the few people that I did not get to meet up with that didn't get their plob scrolls. There was about 4 or 5 of them. I apologize. I ended up leaving a little bit early on Saturday night, and then I didn't even cosplay Sunday. I just, wore my Ivy and Harley Quinn shirt with my matching Loungefly. That is because if you did not see the story, my ex, who I've had a restraining order against for over a decade, decided to break the restraining order. He is a plob. He is a plob, by the way. He still lives with his family members. He's never had a job. Never like complete loser. He turned 30 recently, a couple weeks ago, and he had got some birthday money and also asked for his birthday to be sent to Momocon to come stalk me. It was a whole situation. I even have like a meeting with a detective tomorrow at 8 a.m. when because of the restraining order breaking and all this crap, right? So I do apologize that I missed people because I ended up leaving shortly after that encounter with him just to get my head back together, and I went back to the hotel. But let's jump right into the incel story, former GameStop stories that were sent in to me, these former incels. So the latest one that I've had was a former incel who he admitted, he was like, yeah, I was an incel at the time. I met this guy while working. They were GameStop employees. He met this guy, it was a fellow employee who was like a 10 times bigger plob, ironically married to a flob, which we rarely ever see because a lot of people ask, why do femcels and incels not just date each other? It is because they both have very unrealistic standards of the other sex, and that they don't want each other. Okay, they want to say that it's all women's fault or all men's fault or whatever for not, being able to get laid, and why they have these horrible ideologies. But then they don't get together with each other. It's like, yeah, see, you're just looking for an excuse instead of trying to fix yourself. But this was an eye-opener for him. He said he ended up moving in with them. They were plob parents. He even met her like through Magic the Gathering, and so like where the husband introduced her, like was trying to teach him Magic the Gathering. I believe it's Magic the Gathering. It might have been a different card game. Might be slightly wrong on that detail, but teaching him a card game. He seemed normal at first. Ends up moving in with this couple, and first he was younger. They tricked him into not having him on the lease, and then basically threatened, hey, if you don't pay our rent, then we'll just kick you out. Immediately started hoarding. They had a child because she was pregnant when they met. They had a child. They were stacking diapers and shit and nasty food containers and stuff. Like he said, it was about 6 inches off the ground. These stacks were so high all around the house, and all they cared about was being on their computer gaming. There was a point where CPS even got involved because the kids, because the guy was abusing them, and the woman was like, allowing it because the guy would take out his rage on the kids and just be like, oh no, she was like, oh, it's fine as long as I get to be on my computer gaming. Like as long as the kids left her alone to game, she did not care that her husband was abusing them. And because they were so busy gaming and neglecting their kids, they were also neglecting their space around them, and were hoarding up all of this nastiness, the piss bottles and everything like we've seen with the other ones. I'm really praying that those kids got out of that situation. But this situation was so bad that it made him realize, hey, maybe the incel ideology, maybe all this stuff I'm believing is wrong, and I should not, like he had a life-changing moment, and he turned himself around because of his interaction with these guys, and with this guy and this girl, which is more proof that this is a choice. This is a life choice to have that stinky, I'm not going to bathe, I'm just going to sit in my basement all day, this is video game addiction type stuff. The being nasty, the being sexist, the being gross and inappropriate and creepy is a choice. Because this is, I still have a third one my third one I haven't posted yet from the other former incel that reached out to me. But this is the second incel story that we've came over from a former incel who's like, yeah, the plobs were so bad that it made me realize I needed to change. You guys are going to get a special sneak peek. Well, not sneak peek. I'm just going to tell the full story here. But the third incel that I have not posted about yet on TikTok that I will get to, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys the full detail that has reached out to me, is a former incel who also had a very, very bad plob experience with plob incels that made him turn his life around. And he said he is now happily married with kids, and he's disgusted by guys like that. And like, he thanked me for my series talking about how this kind of shit needs to happen, like how having these conversations and shaming these motherfuckers into having a reality check can be really freaking helpful. So this guy worked at a card store, a local. It was a half card, half comic shop, which is pretty traditional. There's a lot of those out there where they're half and half. He worked there for 9 years. And he said he had the incel mindset. He had the alpha male BS. He admits that he used to buy those, subscriptions and listen to those podcasts from those guys that like ruin everything and give them bad advice. It's so crazy because when you really think about it, a lot of these guys, they're not just scamming other men. They're not just scamming other men. When they give the bad advice and sell them all this, crap. Oh, look at all these women. Which, by the way, if you've never seen them and you're wondering like how they get guys to buy it, it's because they pay OnlyFans models to take pictures and videos with them and pretend like they've slept together and all of this stuff and pretend like the advice it works. I actually have an experience of one trying to get me to do this. So they do that kind of stuff to give these guys false hope and be like, yeah, look, there's, also that was a chair. I didn't fart, I promise. If I did, I would have just been like, excuse me, but no, that's my chair. But that's how they hook these guys in. They pretend to be super successful. They'll buy knockoff, designer stuff and sit there and be like, yeah, look how all these sexy women that I'm getting, and they kind of draw them into that crap. But this guy admitted he was down that path. He had fallen far down it. He ended up having an entire group of plobs that made him have an eye-opening moment, though. So they came into the card shop. They did the traditional BS of being nasty and gross, and stinking. That card shop didn't have a hygiene policy, but they started coming in every night. He said for 2 weeks, and at the 2-week mark, he finally ended up quitting the store because the manager wouldn't do anything about it. These guys were not just doing the stinky nastiness and harassing everything. He said they would openly harass women that would come in, to the point where one of them had even was like spraying women with like his Monster energy drink, would like shake it back and forth and spray it at women who would come in just trying to have a conversation, which by the way is assault. I wish he'd called the cops in that situation. But at the 2-week mark, these guys had started to make themselves comfortable, basically hanging out in the card shop from open to close every single day, because people didn't want them in their house. He did say like one of the main reasons was one of the guys admitted that his mom. Keep in mind, all of these guys, he said, were between 35 and like 45. One of them was complaining that their mom didn't want them in the house anymore. Like, he wanted them to get out of the house as much as possible, is why they'd started coming there. But they had started to turn it into their home, basically, just like they did at home. They were leaving messes at the card shop. There were shit streaks in the chairs multiple times. The guy couldn't get the store owner to do anything about it. And one thing that he noticed, like what gave him the reality check, is when these guys would talk about like the podcasts and the videos and the idealizations that they had were very similar to his. And like, he was like, yeah, so we even listened to some of the same podcasts. And it kind of was like an eye-opener watching these guys be nasty and gross and like dirtying up the shop. He said they were pissing in bottles at the shop. Like, they would be playing Magic and didn't want to get up and would piss in a bottle right in front of everybody at the store. He said he had to throw away multiple piss bottles. He said there was multiple times he went into the bathroom and would find cum, like where they were jerking off into the bathroom too. He said they were getting things sticky and nasty. They would eat, just be sitting there eating junk and leaving crumbs everywhere. And just this complete horrible ideologies, very elitism, very, the typical misogyny. It's women's fault that we can't get laid. It's because they control all the sex, and there's all this bullshit. But they would also bash other men. Oh, you're not a real man if you're not to this level. You're not a real player. Oh, I have this many hours, so I'm better than you. And he said after the 2 weeks, like, it got so bad that he finally got to the breaking point. He really sat down and listened, and he was like, wow, like, seeing that from an outside perspective made him realize, I need to turn around and change. He said it was already building up. He had gotten to the point where he was about to quit like 2 days before he actually did, because there was a conversation that was had about this guy was making jokes about grass on the field and blah blah blah, and how he would purposely go on Discord and would try to purposely target like young girls, like 16, 17-year olds, these girls, because he's like, yeah, they're easier to manipulate, and women my age won't like talk to me, or they call me out on stuff, like they're just a big pain in my ass, and they have a loud mouth, and they won't like learn their place, and talking about how much he wanted a submissive wife and stuff. First of all, sir, if you're in your mid 30s to, or possibly, I can't remember what age this particular guy was that he was having the conversation with, but you're like mid 30s or older, still living at home with your mommy, but you want a submissive wife that's a housewife and staying at home. Is she gonna move in with you and your mom? The fuck are you talking about? What do you mean you want to? What the fuck do you have to offer, sir? This is the kind of guy that comes up and is like, well, what do you bring to the table to a woman? But you have nothing that you're bringing to the table. You're living at home with your mom, not working, and the only socialization that you do is to go to the game shop for hours at a time from open to close for 2 weeks. What the fuck? He said that was the pedophilia kind of shit with talking about wanting young girls and everything, and talking about how he was catfishing and all this crap. That is what made him finally get to more. He's like, okay, I'm going to break. And then a couple days later, he did break because the conversations continued with the shit and them, being disgusting and gross in the store, to the point where he was like, okay, yeah, I can't. He's like, I cannot do this shit anymore. He ended up quitting. And once again, it was one of those owners that wouldn't do anything about this kind of behavior. And it's wild to me because we've seen so many stories where people are talking about how the owners will not kick them out because they're like, oh, but they spend so much money. When realistically, if you just created a hygienic, non-stinky, safe space, there are a lot of people who would buy from that space, men and women. Like, women have money too. It doesn't matter your gender. People have jobs and money and want to spend it, but they don't want to spend it somewhere that's nasty and gross, that is allowing these guys to be like shit streaking the chairs and jerking in the bathroom and spraying women with monsters. He said every single one of them also had like a little anime figure that was their wife or waifu or whatever, and they would like sit it out on the little table every time they were playing too. Like, the money you make off of these guys is nothing compared to what stores that actually have hygiene policies and policies against being pieces of shit asshole plobs would make you. Like, you would make so much more money off of that. And we've proven that. There's a store, if you've not seen that story time, there was a store owner who literally saw my videos, saw people's comments, like saw these people talking about how bad it was and how they were shopping online because of these guys. He'd made a hygiene policy, and he actually started making more money once the public started realizing, like, oh, this is now a safe space to go. So for everyone who gets mad, the incels and stuff that get mad at me telling these story times, and the owners who don't want to do anything about it, there is proof now that it changed, like calling this shit out, refusing to put up with it, refusing to let these nasty plobs and flobs ruin fandom space and continue their BS, basically enabling it by allowing it. If you get rid of it, it does make real change. Calling them out is making real change. Telling these stories, talking about how disgusting it is starting to open people's eyes. It's helping open a lot of, even owners' eyes now, and showing that we can change this. Most of fandom is not these horrible, nasty people, but that small percentage is causing it to be ruined. And once again, you are not the oppressed. The incels talking about, you are not the oppressed. I still cannot believe I got that comment from somebody being like, you're cosplaying as oppression. You're oppressing us by not letting us smell up and launch a freaking terrorist attack on your noses in public spaces and shit our pants. Sometimes I genuinely would like to be inside some of these motherfuckers' brains just to figure out how they came to that conclusion. Like, what mental gymnastics are you doing to convince yourself that you're the victim in this situation? Something I just realized I forgot to mention when I was talking about the incel former incel who'd lived with those plobs and flobs and rearranged stuff. Got to the point where he was like, oh crap, I need to rearrange my life. He also mentioned how one of these plobs had done stolen valor and would go around telling people that he was a former ranger. First of all, sir, I'm not trying to be fat phobic or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. I love a plus size woman. And I've had exes who are plus size. But I'm just going to say it. There is no fucking world where you were a ranger and look the way that you do. There's no rangers also don't go around talking about that. It is Memorial Day weekend, so I'm already heated enough on this particular topic. I am really big as a disabled veteran, who's married to active duty and a gold star because my brother passed while deployed in Afghanistan. Um, I no, I cannot stand stolen valor, and to have a plob stinking up and acting. That's another thing. Is typically you can tell when it's stolen valor by the way people act, because yes, there's military plobs. We've told stories about them, but never to that length. I know, and the frustrating thing is stolen valor is a felony, by the way, if you were unaware, but it's super hard to get anything to actually be done about it. And as a veteran, I'm telling you right now, if somebody is constantly talking about their service and stuff and like with no proof and they're not showing ID or DD-24 and anything, and they're saying that they were like special ops or a Navy SEAL or something, there's a 99% chance that they're lying. I don't know why these stolen valor guys do this, but like usually when it's stolen valor, they always like say that they were like 100 confirmed kills, Billy Badass over here. They always like greatly go into like how they're basically a hero. Like it's never just somebody just like pretending they were in the military. They always take it to the max. If you haven't seen the story time on this, I will probably retell it on TikTok soon because it's been a couple years since I bought it. There's actually a stolen valor guy that I went to basic with who is a plob. So you're probably wondering like, well, if he went to basic, but no. So let me explain. We had a situation where there was a guy who he had just went through a massive loss a couple days before he shipped to basic, and so when he got to basic he was really struggling with it, and due to that the military said, hey, we're giving you the option, you can go home, it won't count against you, and in 6 months you can come back to basic, or you could stay, like let us know what we can do. And he decided he was going to go home. Now here's the thing about the military is there's this thing called a battle buddy system. You have to have a battle buddy everywhere you go, so another soldier trainee with you when you're at basic. Now there's this man named Moses who he actually came from my home state, like we flew out together and everything. He was the battle buddy to the guy who was having those issues. And Moses figured out after bragging to everybody about how he was going to be in the National Guard, and he had, he was Billy Badass and stuff, and how much he loved Call of Duty, and he was so good at He kept talking about how he was so good at Call of Duty, so he knew he was going to like be great in the military. Yeah, he got to basic. This is also back when it was a full 3 months and not that 10-week, 8-week, whatever the fuck they changed it to now. But we get there and he realizes, yeah, he ain't going to be able to fucking cut it. He ain't going to be able to cut it. He is quickly failing. So he decides he is going to lie and pretend to have the same stress and stuff and like how he can't handle it so he can get out of basic, and pretend like literally was just copying everything that the guy who legitimately had problems and got to go home was. But that backfired on him pretty quickly because they knew he was faking it. So they said, okay, we're going to send you home at the end of basic. At the end of basic, you are not going to be an active duty soldier. You're going to, a guardsman. He was going guards, but he's like, you're not going to AIT or anything out of this, but you're going to have to stay here until the end of basic. We're going to get you your care. We're going to make sure you don't do any qualifying events though, so you can't graduate, but you're going to get sent home like you're begging to do. And the guy was such a fucking, oh my gosh, he was such a fucking creep about this shit too. Was constantly whining and crying. He's the one that wrote the fan fiction about me. If you don't know, when I was at basic training, I got pulled aside. I think we were at like week 7 or 8 because there was this 2-page handwritten fan fiction about me, and like my drill sergeant pulled me aside. And then there was a whole thing that they got smoked and stuff. The whole bay got smoked because they were trying to figure out who did it. Finally, like Moses confessed. They wrote a pornographic fan fiction about me. He was super creepy towards me too. But yeah, guy was just a piece of shit. But here's where the stolen valor thing comes out. He gets out of, like, they finally, like, on the last day when we're getting, I think they sent him home the day before we graduated. They sent him home. They're like, okay, well, you can go now. So, like, I think it was a good, like, because he pulled the scam, like, 3 weeks in. So he's a good a couple months of having to still sit at basic and deal with shit, knowing he was never going to graduate, never going to be in. Since he pulled this stunt, they were, over his shit. But they sent the guy that was, actually going through stuff, they sent him home, like, within a few days of, them deciding that they were going to offer him that. And especially when you consider, like, how shitty my basic was, because if you don't know, our battalion they were making these new barracks and they were condemning the old buildings, and it was a shit show because our company was the only company that the barracks weren't made in time, so or finished with the remodeling in time. I can't remember what the issue was. So we got put in the condemned barracks. We were in condemned barracks away from everything else. Didn't even have our own DFAC and stuff. We ate hot A's was a treat, and we ate MREs like the rest of the time. We got to go to a real nice DFAC one time the entirety of basic. Like it was a nightmare. Point is, we got through it. And he had to live through all of the shit show just to knowing the entire time that he was not going to graduate. But he ended up getting out and he goes back to home state, and he to this day does this shit where he had the guard given him uniforms. Because you get uniforms at basic, but also if you're a guard, I don't know if reserves does this too because I was active duty, but I do know the guard. You go to like drill basically before you go to basically you'll go 1 or 2 weekends, so you end up having uniforms. He never returned those uniforms like he was supposed to, and he goes around West Virginia smelling like ass. That's another first sign. I'm gonna tell you right now, if he's walking around in uniform, constantly smells like ass because he does not bathe. He sits at home in games all day. But whenever it's Veterans Day or it's Monday, Speedway will give out free coffee or whatever, he will go in uniform, and he has bought some patches online that he's put on himself and pretends he's Billy Badass, and that he's like, oh, he tells people, he's like, yeah, I was just so accelerated that they, I didn't have to go to AIT or anything. I'm a super soldier, blah, blah, blah. When realistically, he was kicked out at basic training. And he likes to go in the lobby of things like Call of Duty games because he's still freaking addicted to it, and will like act like he was a special forces freaking Navy SEAL, everything under the book, and go around tell people in Call of Duty lobbies about how he's a military badass, when realistically he was the biggest pussy on the planet, freaking copped out a couple weeks into basic and got kicked out. If you ever are in West Virginia and you encounter him, you will know. I've even had, like, when I talk about this story, I've had random people from West Virginia, because, I'm from a small state, West Virginia, small, who have been like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about, encountering Moses. He's actually banned from several card shops and card shops and game stores in West Virginia, too, because of his behavior, because they don't want to deal with his ass either. There has been 2 separate times, actually, over the last 10 years since he started doing this shit, like, since the basic happened. There's been 2 separate times I've actually seen him when I went back home and visited, and he literally has ran for me. The second he realized it was me, he ran for me because he knows I'm about to rip his asshole a whole nother fucking level, to the point where he is going to be able to take the Great American Challenge up his ass with ease because he knows that I don't put up with that stolen valor shit. Once again, I'm a disabled veteran myself, and also I am from a Gold Star family. I don't put up with stolen valor. I will rip the uniform right off your fucking body if I have to. Just keep in mind this weekend, because it is Memorial Day weekend. Remember, this weekend is not for veterans. It is for those who have lost their life in service. It's one thing that gets really under my skin and a lot of other people's skin, and that we know that like civilians don't do it on purpose. A lot of times they do it just because they don't realize. But this is not the weekend to thank a veteran. This is a weekend to remember those who have lost their lives, because Veterans Day is the day for us. Veterans Day is our, free food day. I love that. I'll fully admit, I am walking around with my 100% disabled veteran card on Veterans Day, getting all the free food I can. But that is not what Memorial Day is for. It can be very triggering, too, for a lot of veterans, to be thanked on Memorial Day for those of us who have lost. So please keep that in mind. Keep in mind the difference of those holidays. And if you're doing stolen valor, I hope that you step in a wet puddle with your socks and then accidentally walk into an electric fence that's turned on. And if my extreme take on that offends you, I don't care. I said what I said. Unless you're giving me head, your opinion doesn't fucking matter to me. Thank you. If you have a problem or a complaint, you can take that straight to Fort Knox and ask them for a fuck to give, because the military took all my fucks away to give. I do not care about people getting offended when I point out that stolen valor is complete trash. I don't care that people get offended when I point out that these plobs are complete trash. Stolen valor is a horrible thing, and plobs are horrible people that ruin fandom space. Both bad people. The fact that some of y'all are a combination of both is actual insanity. Before I end this week's episode, I do want to let you guys know I have looked into a streaming platform service thing, a website that would allow me to do digital like collabs. And like I said, I want to have regular people, other GameStop employees, other people who have experienced plot, people in fandom. Like, I don't care if you have a following or 2 people following you. I want to get other people's stories on the podcast. Not just because I hate when you only see famous people on podcasts, like as guests. Give regular people the chance to talk about their experiences in these situations too. I will say I do. If I could pick like one famous or like big influencer I would want to collab with, it would be Drew because she is freaking hilarious when she roasts men. And just imagine putting us two in the same room, roasting these plobs. I actually need to at some point listen to her podcast. I haven't listened to it, but I've seen her videos and she's hilarious. But I'm gonna figure out a way to have like a follower submission. They will have to be 18 plus, obviously. But where people can set up for us to do a plobcast episode like with them and have them tell their stories and stuff too. I'm also trying to figure out another like a forums or something that I can have people be able to submit their stories instead of having to worry about them getting lost in my DMs and taking a month before I can find them. I make sure I get to everybody, but sometimes it takes a minute because of all the spam sugar daddy fake crap that I get in my DMs, or people pretending to be celebrities or big influencers. Recently had people do that with like big influencers I'm actually mutuals with, which I thought was hilarious because I'm like, buddy, this is so obviously fake. Please don't ever fall for those scams either. Please, please, please don't fall for these creepy fake sugar daddy scams that are blowing up people's DMs or pretending to be celebrities. I'm also going to try to upgrade to 2 episodes a week because my other I've got so many stories that come in. That way I can do 2 episodes a week and just set up a schedule. So it's going to be Monday and then I think maybe like Thursday. It just depends. I'm going to try to get it as soon as I can, I promise. My last advice is if you are feeling down, you feel like you haven't done a lot recently, maybe you're dealing with something and you just don't feel like you're being productive, just remember, if you at least washed your ass today, or even just yesterday, if you've washed your ass in the last 24 hours, you're already doing better than all of these nasty plobs. So you're still doing better than some people. I always tell people anytime you are feeling down or bad, like, oh gosh, I haven't done anything lately, or oh gosh, I'm being so lazy, or whatever, just remember, these plobs out there exist. They're just out there existing and they think it's a good thing, and you are already doing better than them. And as always, I am a Kindle with interchangeable accessories for their pleasure. Everybody stay safe and stay showered.